Good morning and welcome to Tech 293, Mechanical Properties of Materials, or as I like to call it, How to Break Stuff, because that's what we'll be doing a lot of in this semester. This is a really fun class, I think. I sincerely enjoy it. We're going to be breaking a lot of stuff. We're going to be testing a lot of specimens. We'll make predictions about what's going to happen. You'll get to design and build something and then test it and see how much force it can support. And overall, I just think it's a really fun class. This really is one of my favorite classes to teach, and I hope that's apparent, and I hope that you enjoy it as well, and learn something from it at the same time. A little bit about me, just to introduce myself. My name is Matt Aldeman. I'll be the instructor for this course. I've been at ISU for a little over 11 years, but I've been teaching in the Department of Technology for 5.5 years. And I'd have to count, I haven't counted, but I think I've been teaching Tech 293 for about 6 or 7 times. This will be like maybe my 6th or 7th or 8th time teaching Tech 293. To keep it entertaining, I don't keep it exactly the same every semester. I make some slight tweaks and modifications every semester to entertain myself and keep things fresh. I have a bunch of hobbies that I like to do in my off time. My wife says that I have too many hobbies, but I think that's impossible. I think that interesting people have interesting hobbies, and I try to say that I try to keep myself interested. So I like to run. I'm a bit of a runner, although I have had some hip joint issues in the past year or so. So that's slowing me down a little bit, but I do like to run as much as I can. Not super long distances, but usually like 5Ks, 5 miles, 6 miles, something like that is what I like to do. I also like when it's nice outside, I like to get out on the lakes around here in central Illinois, Lake Bloomington, Clinton Lake, especially those two. And I like to go out on my boat. I have a 14-foot aluminum boat. It's not much. It's not very big, but it's just enough to pull a water skier barely out of the water. And it's got a 50 horsepower outboard. It pulls tubes, so I like to take my kids out on the lake and have some fun out on the lake. So that's my favorite summer activity, I think. I also like to do home brewing, like making my own beer. I usually do a lot of that over the holiday break between Christmas and New Year's, and that is definitely what I did this year because I had some time over the past month. So I did quite a bit of home brewing over the past month. I think I made about, 40 or 45 gallons over the past month. And that'll keep me well stocked over the next year. And I also give some away to friends and family and stuff too. So I don't drink all of that. And by the way, most of what I make is pretty low alcohol also, like less than a standard Bud Light or something. I just do it because it's fun and I like the taste. I don't necessarily condone it. All right. So I'm not saying that everybody should start brewing their own beer or something, but it's kind of equal parts fun and art and science and it's fun. It's a fun gift to give people. So anyway, I enjoy doing that. I had some good batches over the past month that are now fermenting in my basement. I made like a citrusy IPA and a peanut butter porter and an Oktoberfest for next fall. And what else did I make? Oh, like a spicy stout, one of those. And another one that just kind of like a plain ale. I made one of those. So I've got between 5 and 10 gallons of each of those in my basement right now. What else? I like to learn languages, so I'm working on French, and I do my Duolingo on my phone every day. And I'm a little bit proud to say that I've got almost a 1,000 day streak of doing Duolingo on my phone. I'm not very good. You would think that I would be a lot better than I actually am, but I do spend between 10-20 minutes studying French on the Duolingo app every day. And last but certainly not least is banjo. I like to play banjo. And I just kind of picked that up probably about a year and a half ago. And when I can, I take lessons, maybe about once a month. I take a lesson from one of the music professors over there in Centennial Hall on campus. So I've been doing some Zoom lessons for the past 8 months or so, since we can't do in-person lessons. But I really do enjoy playing the banjo a lot. In fact, I even keep one in my office, as you can probably see right over there. So there's my banjo. Whenever I get bored or frustrated with something, I can just pull out my banjo and play a few tunes. Maybe I'll embarrass myself by playing a little bit. Once again, I would not say that I'm very good at banjo, just like I'm not very good at French, but that's not really the point. It's just about having fun and relieving some stress and tension and stuff. So I'd recommend it. It's a fun instrument to learn. So that's a little bit about me. If we were in person, then I would be going around the room and I'd ask you all to tell me a couple things about yourself, or something that you did on holiday break, or something to help me get to know you a little bit better. But for obvious reasons, we are limited in what we can do in that regard right now. So what I'd like you to do in the next day or two is to send me an email, and in that email, introduce yourself. Tell me 2 things about yourself, interesting things about yourself, or 2 things that you did over holiday break, or something like that. I'm just looking for some way to get to know you a little bit better, and to start, putting some knowledge about you to your face that I'll hopefully come to recognize in the next semester. All right, so I'd like you to do that. Send me an email. That does 2 things. Number 1, it allows me to start to get to know you a little bit better. And number 2, it forces you to send me an email so that later on in the semester, if you have a question or something isn't clear, it's easy for you. You already have my email address in your Outlook or your inbox, so you can just reply to that and you can easily send me an email. So there's kind of 2 reasons why I want you to do that. All right, so that's kind of your first assignment, is to send me an email with 2 things about you or what you did over holiday break, something like that. Or New Year's resolutions. Tell me what your New Year's resolution for 2021 is. That'd be great too. All right, so now let's go ahead and start talking a little bit more about the course itself. We're not actually going to get into any course content material today. We're just going to talk about the course itself. But there are several different documents that I want to go through. The first one, obviously, is the syllabus. So I want to make sure we're all on the same page, knowing what the plan is for this course. And the second thing I want to cover today is the schedule. And the third thing I will talk about is, I'll talk about the safety procedures. Next, I won't go into a whole lot of detail on these, but once again, all of these that I'm mentioning right now are all on ReggieNet. They're all in the syllabus tab on ReggieNet. I know, logically only the syllabus would go under the syllabus tab, but I don't think there's a more logical place to put the schedule and the safety procedures and the lab manual. I think the syllabus tab is the most logical place to put those. So that's where they are. And after we talk through those, I'm going to point you to the lab manual, and I want to talk about the first page in the lab manual, which is the lab report template. So I'm giving you a template that I want you to use, and I'm trying to make it very, very straightforward and simple for you to use to write your lab reports that you'll use after all of the labs in this class. All right, so those are the things we're going to talk through today. So to do that, I'm going to switch over to, I have kind of a makeshift Jimmy Rig document camera here set up. So to talk through those documents, I'm going to switch over to the document camera. So here's the syllabus. I hope you can see this clearly enough on the document camera. You don't necessarily need to print this as long as you know where to find it. And once again, it's on RegNet under the syllabus tab. So we're going to go through this. I'm not going to read everything to you, but I'm just going to hit the high points to make sure we all understand what's going to be involved in this course. So first of all, the location. This is a little bit different type of semester, so there's a bunch of different locations. But in general, the lectures are going to be asynchronous online, so I'll post them on YouTube every Tuesday and Thursday morning. So you'll get an announcement from me every Tuesday morning and every Thursday morning with a link to the videos for that day. And you can watch them whenever you want, but I would definitely recommend watching them within a day or two of when I send them. That way you can keep up to date and you'll know what's going on for the next quiz in the course or the next lab in the course and so on. If you let it go too long and you let the videos build up, then it becomes very challenging to get yourself caught up. All right, so lectures are going to be online. The labs are going to be in a couple different places. First of all, the first 2 labs will be online, just because Lab 1 and Lab 2 are pretty easy and straightforward, and I just didn't think it's worth having you come in to do those labs in person. So I'm just going to record myself doing Lab 1 and Lab 2 and post that video for you online. The rest of the labs, labs 3 through 9, are going to be in one of these 2 rooms right here. Turner 122 is also known as the Plastics Lab. It's down there on the south side of the building on Turner Hall, kind of close to, across the street from the junior high over there. Turner 169, that's the Woods Lab up on the north side of the building, kind of close to the field house up there on the north side of the building. All right, so those are the 2 places, and I'll make sure it's clear which place you should go to for each lab. Just watch the videos and pay attention to the announcements, and I'll make sure that you know where to go for each lab day. Okay, we talked about where the lectures. My office is in Turner Hall 109. It's right near the main intersection of the hallways of Turner Hall on the first floor, and it's right next to the drinking fountain. I've got a drinking fountain about 6 feet away from my office door. It's kind of convenient for me to fill up my water bottles and my coffee pot and stuff like that. Here's my email. This is probably the best way of getting in touch with me, is to email me. I'm pretty good about responding to emails. Give me maybe 24 hours to respond. And if I don't, then it's possible it may have, slipped my mind or something like that. So you can send me a reminder, but I'm pretty good about responding to emails within about a day or so usually. My office hours, I would encourage you to make use of these office hours. I'm going to have office hours from 11 o'clock to 12 o'clock. They're going to be on Zoom, and I will send you the link in my Thursday announcement every week. It'll always be the same link, so you can always just click on any link to my office hours will work, because it'll be the same meeting, the same meeting ID number every Thursday. But do take advantage of office hours, not just for me, but I would say for all of your classes. I always try to tell students this, that instructors like myself, we like talking about this material. It's fun, it's enjoyable. And I like talking to students as well. So if you come to office hours, it's not a burden by any means. It's fun for me to talk to you about this material. So don't feel like you're being a burden to your professors when you go to their office hours. Make use of them. All right, I'm not going to read you that. You can read that yourself. I'm not going to read that either. And I just kind of talked about the delivery. It'll be in a combination of some online and some in person for most of the labs. The objectives, I'll let you read through those on your own. And I'm going to skip to page 2, where it talks about the topical outline. All right, so this is really the best outline for the course. We're going to split the course into 3 different sections, the first, second, and third of the course. There'll be an exam after each third. So one common question is about exam 3. Is it cumulative? No, not exactly. In fact, none of the exams are exactly cumulative, but they cover more than just that single 1/3. Let's talk through this. All right, so the first two things here, items 1 and 2, these are what I would call materials science topics. So it's kind of like at the atomic or molecular level, how are materials put together? How are materials put together? Because that determines how they're going to behave on the large scale view. So it's kind of like the micro scale view versus the macro scale view. And as you can see, most of the content in this course is about how materials behave at the macro scale view, the large scale view. Like if I build an I-beam, how do I know how much force that I-beam can support? We'll talk about that down here in flexural testing. But to start with, we got to talk about the micro scale view because that's why materials behave the way they do. So items 1 and 2 are kind of the micro scale view, the atomic and molecular structure of materials and how they're put together. And then in item number 3, we start to go into the macro scale or large scale view of how the materials behave. And the first thing we'll talk about is hardness testing, talking about how hard something is. And that's going to be the first third of the class. So exam 1 is going to cover these 3 things. Okay, then we're going to go into some testing on the universal testing machine down there in the lab. And the next 3 labs are going to be about tensile testing and compressive testing. So I got some specimens here. Here's an example of a plastic tensile specimen. So we're going to load this up in the machine, and then we're going to pull it apart. We're going to stretch it apart. When we stretch it apart, we're putting this material in tension, and we call that a tensile test. So we'll do that for a bunch of different specimens. Here's a metal. This is an aluminum specimen. We'll load this in the machine and pull it apart until it breaks. And then we can make some calculations and we can draw some conclusions about how these materials behave. The opposite of tensile testing is compressive testing. And instead of pulling something apart, we're going to push it together. That's what compressive testing is. So then the next exam, exam 2, is about items 4 and 5, tensile and compressive testing. But because items 1 and 2 in some ways explain why these materials behave the way they do, items 1 and 2 are also potential materials for exam 2. All right, so here it says exam 2 covers material from items 1 and 2. That's the material science part, as well as 4 and 5. 4 and 5 is tensile and compressive testing. The emphasis here on exam 2 will be about items 4 and 5, but there could still be some material from items 1 and 2, that material science stuff. All right. So a little bit of this stuff and a lot more of this stuff on exam 2. Exam 3 is similar. It's going to cover items 1 and 2. Why? Because that's going to explain why these materials behave the way they do, and also 6, 7, and 8. 6 is going to be heat treatment and failure modes, the way things fail. We'll talk about that. And we'll do lab 7 to learn more about that. Item number 7 here is flexural testing. That's like bending something. Like if I took this and I bent it apart, I don't really want to break it, but if I bent it apart, that's flexure testing. And lab 8 is what we'll do to learn more about flexure testing. And item number 8 is shear stress. Shear stress is like sliding part of material against the other part of the material. So if this is a material and I slide part of it against the other part of it, that is a shear force, and a shear force results in shear stress. We'll talk more about what stress is later on. But to learn more about that, we do lab 9, where we do some shear testing of materials and we test adhesive joints like glued joints. And then exam 3, like I said, covers material from 1, 2, 6, 7, and 8. So these 2 and 6, 7, and 8. So in exam 3, you won't see anything about tensile testing or compressive testing or hardness testing. All right, makes sense? Let me know if it doesn't. Textbooks, all right, the only thing that's really required in this class is the lab packet. You need to have the lab packet. In fact, you need a printed copy of the lab packet so that you can take it into the lab and use it as your instructions for in the lab. So you know what you're doing in the lab. So you can purchase it from Alamo 2. I sent it a little while ago to Pitt Printing, and they give it to Alamo 2, so you can buy it there. But if you don't want to go into Alamo 2, that's fine too. I understand that, especially in light of the pandemic. So you can also print it. It's not really that many pages. What is it? Like, looks like it's about 100 pages, but I would print it front and back, so it'd be about 50 sheets of paper. If you do print it yourself, that's totally fine also. Like I said, I would print it front and back, black and white, with 3-hole punches on the sides, and that way you can put it in a binder. That's what I do. I put all this stuff in a binder. All right, there are some other optional textbooks that might be helpful for you. You certainly don't have to have any of these, but some of them might be useful. I'll talk about just a couple of these. Let's see. The first two here are actually textbooks that I still have from my undergraduate days. This is why I do kind of like textbooks. You can keep them for reference. So this, actually, it's right under here. This is the one by Callister. That is number 2. And this is a materials science textbook. It's not really a mechanics of materials, so this is more like the atomic and molecular structure of materials that then explains the macro scale behavior of the materials. So item number 2 is one that I had when I was an undergrad. And what I'd recommend doing, if you are interested in buying some of these optional textbooks, by all means, get an older edition. Most of these textbooks have a new edition that comes out every 3 or 4 years, and all that really changes, usually, is the problems, the problems at the back of the chapter. So by all means, if you're getting it for a reference, then get an older edition, and usually they're really cheap. If you get like 3 or 4 editions back, you can get them usually really cheap for like 15 bucks, 20 bucks maybe, something like that, on half.com or eBay. Maybe Amazon, although Amazon usually just has the latest editions of stuff. So go for those older editions. That's my recommendation. So that's a materials science one. I'd recommend that one. This is a more modern materials science one. This is not one I used in my undergrad, but you can see that I do use it. I mean, I've got these tabs that I use fairly frequently. So this is a good textbook, a little bit more recent than this one. So that was item number 3. That was Askland and Donald. That's a good one as well. That's also materials science. The first one here, this looks kind of old, and that's because it is. This is also a textbook that I used when I was an undergrad. This is the first one here. Beer, Ferdinand, and Johnson and Russell. So this is a nice old textbook, but it has a lot of really good information in it. So when it comes to things like tensile stress and compressive stress and beam bending and shear stress and things like that, all of that's mechanics of materials. That's the macro scale, how things behave, right? So that's what we call mechanics of materials, and this is a good one for that. All the rest of these are good, and some of these are in the library, I believe. But these first 3 are ones that I actually keep in my office. So I use these for references myself fairly frequently. So I'd recommend them to you as well. So you don't have to have any of these. You can pass the class. In fact, I'm sure you can get an A without having any of these. But if you want an additional perspective on some of these things, some of these topics, then it might be useful to get an older edition of one of these textbooks. The other thing that you do have to have for this class is a pair of safety glasses. And most of you, probably this is not your first engineering technology course. So you probably already have them. Well, they look kind of like that. The one thing you have to make sure of is, I'm looking for it right now. Yeah, if you see, it should say somewhere right around here. I'm sure you can't see it, but I can see it, and it says Z87. and it says where it's made in Taiwan. But it needs to say Z87 on it somewhere. That's the standard amount of protection that we use for our safety glasses in our ET classes. So make sure you have a set of glasses and make sure you bring it to each of the labs. For attendance, so this is a bit of a unique semester. There isn't really a lot of in-person except for the labs, but you need to make sure that you keep up to date by watching the videos, do the quizzes on time. In fact, to be honest, part of the reason why I have these quizzes scheduled when I do is to encourage you to keep up to date with the lecture materials and with the labs. So that's going to kind of help keep you on schedule. But it's kind of up to you. You need to make sure that you're watching the videos and keeping up to date, asking questions when you don't understand the material. Make sure you're keeping on top of things in the class. On lab days, when we have in-person lab days, you do have to be here in the lab in order to get credit for that lab. In other words, you can't just rely on your lab group, because you will do this in groups. You can't just rely on your lab group to collect the data and send the data to you. Part of the learning process is you doing the lab and collecting the data. There's a lot of learning that goes on there. So you do have to be here in person on the days of the lab. If you have an issue, I understand things come up, just let me know ahead of time and we can work something out. Okay, so that's kind of part of what this is about too. If you have an illness, I recognize that in today's circumstances, people get sick, people have to quarantine, other family members get sick. So I understand there's stuff that comes up. I'm a pretty understanding, pretty nice guy. Just let me know ahead of time and we can work something out. All right. As much as you can. I know some things you can't let me know ahead of time, but as much as you can, let me know ahead of time so that we can work something out. What are the tasks in this course? Well, we already talked about this. There's going to be 3 exams. It's based on the lecture material as well as the labs and the reading. And they're going to be online. Probably not surprising there. And you can use a calculator. You can use anything from the course material, like example problems or your labs or lab manual. You can use pretty much anything you want except other people in the class. So you can't be texting other people and working on the exam together. That's the one thing you can't use. Pretty much the same thing for the quizzes. There's going to be 6 of those spaced throughout the semester. And you need to do those individually, but you can use a calculator and you can use anything from the course materials that you want. The first quiz, I'll say this again in a little bit, but the first quiz is actually due on Sunday, January 17th. That's the first Sunday of the semester. And it's really easy. So make sure you don't miss this quiz because it's really easy points. Basically, the first quiz is almost exclusively about the syllabus, the course materials, the schedule, safety procedures, things like that. So it's really easy. When you take this first quiz, have the syllabus and the schedule and stuff in front of you on your screen so that you can easily refer to them as you're taking this quiz. All right. The rest of the quizzes are actually going to cover more content and materials that we cover. Lab assignments, there will be 9 lab assignments. The first 2, like I said, the first 2 labs I'm just going to do myself, and I'll make a video about them. But the rest of them, you'll come to class in person and you'll do the labs. You need to be present on the day of the lab when you collect the data. And I absolutely encourage you to discuss the labs with other people in your lab group or other people in your class. But everything about the lab report needs to be your own work. So you need to make your own plots, your own tables, your own graphs, describe it in your own words, all that stuff. But you're more than welcome to discuss it and talk about it with anyone else in the class. They need to be typed, submitted online on RegNet. I've already got all that set up on RegNet, so you can see when everything is due. I will accept lab reports submitted late. I would not encourage it, but if you submit your lab report late, then it's going to be a penalty of 20% off per day. But I will accept it. But don't get into the habit of doing that because lab reports are worth a fair amount of points in this class. So you don't want to be losing a lot of points on your lab reports. Okay, so really the only thing that I can really accept late work on is the lab reports. I can't accept late work on quizzes or exams or doing the labs in person. The only thing I can really accept late work on is the lab reports. Once again, unless you have some really extreme extenuating circumstances, death in the family, an illness, things like that. But in all cases, try to let me know in advance as much as possible, or just communicate with me and keep me informed about what's going on. Here's how the breakdown of the weighting goes. Each of the exams is worth 21.33%. The quizzes, there are 6 of them, and the total is worth 9%. It's 1.5% for each quiz. And the lab assignments, there are 9 of them. They're each worth 3% for a total of 27%. So that's a fair amount of weighting on the lab assignments. So make sure you don't just skip any lab assignments because that'll bring down your grade pretty quickly if you do. Grading scale is pretty standard. I think just about every class has something pretty similar to that. Cleanup. This applies to, it applies to all of the labs, but especially the ones that we do in the Woods lab. I would really appreciate your help in cleaning up the lab after we work in it. There's no janitor. We do have cleaning people, but they don't do things like sweep the floor or clean off the bandsaw or the table saw. So I would really appreciate your help in cleaning up the lab after you do a lab. All right, safety. Safety is really important. In fact, we have a whole list of safety policies that I'll cover briefly in just a minute. The biggest thing is you got to wear your safety glasses. If you don't have your safety glasses, I understand some people, forget them. It happens. So if you forget your safety glasses for a lab, the first time it happens, no problem, no penalty. I'll give you a loaner pair. If it happens again, though, I'm going to take 10% off of that lab, off of the points that you get for that lab. So try to remember your safety glasses, and we won't have to deal with that. If you have any questions about how to operate any of the equipment in any of the labs, please don't hesitate to ask. I'm a pretty approachable guy, I think, so I'm not going to berate you for not knowing how to use an instrument or a piece of equipment. I'd much rather you ask, and I'd be happy to show you how to use it. Okay, academic honesty. Basically, everything you do in this course needs to be your own work and no one else's work. That means, the most common thing I see is not usually copying on exams. It's usually like copying part of someone's lab report or something like that. And don't do it. So even things like plots and figures and graphs and stuff, I want you to make your own plots and graphs and tables and descriptions and things like that. So it's all part of the learning process. So I want you to do that yourself and not copy from somebody else. This does seem to happen. It seems like just about every semester there's something. There's something I have to deal with, and I really don't like dealing with this stuff, the academic honesty stuff. It's not fun to deal with for me, and it's not fun for the students either. So just don't do it, and that way we won't have to deal with it. For the behavior, just be respectful of everybody. I'm going to treat you with respect like you are adults, because you are adults, and you treat me with respect, and you treat each other with respect, and we won't have any problems. The only other thing I want to say about this is don't use your cell phone when you're in the lab. All right, so in the labs, there are things that could kill you when you are working in the lab. So Don't be preoccupied working, doing something on your phone while you should be, doing something else in the lab. So don't use your cell phone when you are doing the labs in class. All right. The only exception that I do allow is if you want to take a video of some of the things as we're testing them, because some of this stuff is really pretty cool. I mean, it's pretty neat to watch what happens as you take this and you stretch it, pull it apart till it breaks, or you crush something until it's a pancake. It's kind of fun. So if you want to video that stuff, then I say, all right, you're videoing it and you're paying attention. You're looking at your phone screen and you're watching the lab through the phone screen. So that's okay. I let people do that. I still count that as you're paying attention. It's just when you're not paying attention that bad things can happen. Okay, this is required. Make sure you do your internship if you're an ET student. And if you need this in a different form, then let me know and we can accommodate you. All right, so that's the syllabus. Make sure you read through that and let me know if you have any questions. I think the next thing I will talk about briefly is the schedule. So remember I said the syllabus, you don't necessarily need to print that out. I probably wouldn't if I were you. I'd just read through it and know where it is if you have questions. The schedule, I would. I really would recommend printing this out so that you have an easy reference for when everything is due. Because this has it all on here. It's possible I could make some changes, but not many. And I might not make any. This is pretty well set. I don't want to say in stone, but it's pretty well set. I don't anticipate any changes to the schedule. So I'm not going to talk through this whole thing, but like I said, the first part of the class is what I call materials science. It's sort of like the atomic and molecular structure of materials. And that's important because it explains why materials behave the way they do for the mechanical properties of the materials, which is the remainder of the course. So everything up until session 5, and up to and including session 5, is materials science. And everything after that is mechanics of materials, the macro or large scale testing that we're going to do. The first assignment, I didn't put anything here, but we already said that your first assignment is to send me an email with 2 things about you or your resolution or what you did over holiday break, just so I can start to get to know you. The first graded assignment, though, is quiz 1. It's due on, that's a Sunday, January 17th. And everything on here, all the assignments, including the quizzes, the exams, and the lab reports, they're all due on the indicated day at 11:55 p.m. on that day, all right? So in the past, I have tried making things due at midnight, but that just gets confusing because then it's not clear. Well, do you mean like late evening on one day, or do you mean on like, it gets confusing. Like it's not clear which day you're referring to if you make it due at midnight. So to alleviate that, I make everything due at 11:55 p.m. on these dates. All right. So quiz 1 is due this Sunday by January 17th. And quite honestly, after watching this video today and, perusing the safety procedures, the syllabus and lab manual and everything, if you've got all that stuff, then you are ready to take that quiz because it's just about the basics of the course, logistics of the course. The first lab, let's talk about that. The first lab will be a week from today, next Tuesday. It'll be a video. This is one of 2 labs that will be a video. And that lab report is going to be due on January 26th. Generally speaking, unless there's a reason not to, I make the lab report due 1 week after you do the lab in class. All right, so that's why 1, 2, so a week after January 19th is January 26th. So lab 1 report is due on January 26th. The only exception to that is I never make a lab due on the same day as an exam. So things like lab 3, I don't make it due 1 week from then because that would be the day of the exam. So I make it due the next day, February 11th. All right. All right, so I think that's just about enough to get you oriented to the schedule. The reading assignments, these are all in your lab manual. And this is your reading assignment, so make sure you read that before you watch this video. And make sure you read that before you watch the next video and things like that. So this is the assignment for you to read before the next class session. All right, so you don't have to read this before this class session. You should read this before the next class session. All right, I know that's sometimes can be a little ambiguous, so I wanted to mention that. Okay, so exam 1, February 9th. Then we go into tensile testing and compressive testing. And exam 2 is on March 18th. We also talk about metals, ferrous metals and non-ferrous metals in parts of this, ferrous metals and non-ferrous metals right there. We have a personal well-being day. I'm sure you got the announcement about that. Unfortunately, spring break is canceled, sort of, for spring semester. So, you know, I'm not thrilled about that either, to be honest with you. I get why they did it. My recommendation, I said this in the survey when I got this, I think what they should have done is, let's say in week 6, give Monday off. In week 7, give Tuesday off. In week 8, give Wednesday off, and so on and so forth. So that you end up having a full 5 days, and each day of the week is off at 1 week of the semester. I understand they don't want students having a week off to go on a spring break trip to Florida or southern Texas or something like that. I get that, but I do think that the mental break of spring break is important, and so at least we get something. We get some personal well-being day. It'd be nice if we had a week, but that's the way it is this semester. All right, so exam 2 is on March 18th. Then we go into heat treatment and failure modes, and we do lab 7, and we talk about beam bending, and we do lab 8, and then we talk about shear forces and shear stress, and we do lab 9, and then the last Thursday is actually the other part of what would have been spring break. So the last Thursday in this class is a reading day, no class. And then exam 3, which again is not exactly cumulative. Look back at the syllabus to see what's on it. That'll be given at the time of the final exam. So there is no fully cumulative final exam in this course. All right, that's the schedule. I recommend, once again, print this out, write these dates in your planner. Do whatever you need to do to make sure that you know when stuff is due. Here are the safety procedures. I am definitely not going to read through all of these with you. You are responsible for them. I think you've probably been through all of this before. Probably in TEC 130 is probably, if not, no, probably TEC 130, I think, might be the course that you go through all this stuff. And I'm not going to go through all of this with you. I want you to read this. This is fair game for the quiz that's due on Sunday. But if I had to boil it down to the 4 most important things from this whole packet of safety procedures, number 1, wear eye protection. That's just required. You can't even be in the lab if you're not wearing eye protection. If you have loose clothing or long hair, tie it back, or better yet, just don't wear loose clothing on the day of a lab. I can't really ask you to cut your hair if you have long hair, but at least tie it back or tuck it in or something. This is really important. This makes me so nervous when I watch students sometimes. This has to do with especially like a table saw or the joiner or the radial arm saw or something. When you have sharp moving objects, don't get your finger, if this is the blade, don't get your finger too close to the blade. It makes me really nervous when I see students having their fingers like an inch or 2 away from this spinning blade. I know that we have a saw-stop table saw. If you don't know what that is, that's okay. We'll talk about it much later in the semester. But even so, you don't want to put your fingers anywhere near a spinning, very sharp object. So what you should do is use a push stick. We have lots of push sticks there in the lab. that you can use. It's a stick. It's exactly what its name sounds like. It's a stick that you use to push the material through the saw so that your fingers don't come anywhere close to the saw blade. So use push sticks. I'm going to underline that because it makes me so nervous. That's honestly one of the most nerve-wracking days for me, is the day when we go into the lab, the woods lab, and you are building your beams for lab 8. That's one of the most nerve-wracking days for me because some students just get their fingers way too close to the blades for my comfort level. Okay, and this one's really important too. If you don't know how to use a piece of equipment, just ask me. And I'm like I said, I already said this. I'm not going to berate you for not knowing how to use it. I'm happy to tell you and give you a refresher on how to use any of the equipment that we've got in our labs. Okay, that's all I'm going to say about the safety procedures. Do read through them and make sure you're familiar with them before you take the quiz. All right, one of the last things here is the lab manual. So yeah, I already mentioned about the lab manual. We talked about it in the context of when we were talking about the syllabus. This is the lab manual, and it is how many pages is it? 99. So it's just under 100 pages. And like I said, you can either buy it from Alamo 2. I don't know exactly how much it is. I always ask. I think it's probably about $15 to $20 if you buy it at Alamo 2. Or you can print it out yourself if you prefer. And just like I mentioned before, I always print this out with a 3-hole punch in it, and then I put it in a binder so that I have a nice reference. And I bring this with me to each of our labs so that I can follow along as we're doing the labs. Okay? And you do need to have a printed copy of the lab manual so that you can follow along in the labs as you're doing the labs. Not to mention the reading assignments are in here as well. So this way you can do the reading assignments, you can make notes in the margins if you have a printed copy of the lab manual. All right, so that's what I recommend. In fact, what I do, I have my 3-hole binder, I have my lab manual, and what I do is I put my schedule right at the beginning of the lab manual, and that's how I have it for the whole semester. That way my schedule is right there, and I know exactly what we're doing on every day of the semester. There's one more document that I want to go over with you, and it's on page 1 of the lab manual, and that is the lab report template. All right, so this is kind of like instructions for the lab reports that you're going to write after each of the labs that we do. And what I always find is that, especially lab 1 and lab 2, as people are kind of getting used to writing the lab report, a lot of the grades on lab 1 and lab 2 are reflective of how well people read through this lab report. So I'm going to go through this not in a great detail, but in a little bit of detail. And the best thing about this is I'm going to give you a Word document version of this template. It's on ReggieNet, and it's in Word document format. So all you have to do is download that, open it up, and then modify it to write the lab report for lab 1, 2, 3, etc., etc. I'm not saying that's trivial. I mean, you're going to have to do quite a bit of work to write the lab reports, but at least I'm giving you the basic structure and format for everything, so you don't have to type all of this out. You can just edit it. All right, so I think that's should be a big help for you. All right, so edit this to be the lab number, the title of the lab, maybe a subtitle if there is one. Put your name here and then the dates and your group members. I want to know who else was in your group. So we will talk about this later. We will assign lab groups, but it doesn't really matter until lab 3 because, like I said, lab 1 and lab 2 are just videos. So lab 3 is the first one that you'll be doing with your lab groups. So starting with lab 3, I want you to make sure you put your group members here. And then I want the first section to be about equipment and materials. That can be in bullet points, does not have to be in complete sentences, but be descriptive. So describe what different equipment you used and what different materials you used to do this lab. And then the second part should be the procedure. This is where you should describe in paragraph format what we did in the lab. What was the procedure that you followed as you were doing this lab? Don't just copy down the steps in the lab manual. I want you to use your own words and describe everything that we did in each lab. All right. It could be a couple of paragraphs. It just kind of depends on how involved the lab was. Some of them are more complex or have more steps to them than others. Then in the results section, I want you to provide the results. This is going to vary by lab, but basically the raw data that you collected, I want you to put this in here. This is where your plots and your tables go. And there are a few things I really want you to pay attention to about those tables and plots and figures, all right? So this is just technical writing, and some people, you might say, this is not an English course, and I'm well aware this is not an English course, but you do have to be able to communicate technical findings, and technical communication is definitely a part of this course, and it's really a part of all ET courses. It's not really worth anything if you can't communicate what your findings are. So this is kind of just part of technical communication. So when you make a plot, a couple things. First of all, every single plot or graph that you make should have a title on it, like that. It should also have labels on the vertical axis as well as the horizontal axis. It should also have units on the vertical axis as well as the horizontal axis. All right, so you can see this is an example of a chart that's not very good because it does not have a label here. It doesn't have units here. I mean, it's obviously not a very serious graph. It's kind of a joke, but it's not a very good graph. You would not get full credit for this graph if you submitted this. So there should be a title down here and units as applicable. And then also below every figure or every plot graph table, you should describe it with a figure number. So this is, if it's the first one, it's figure 1. If it's the second one, it's figure 2, etc. And then give a brief description of what it is. So this is not a very good one, but the one on the next page is a pretty good one. So you notice this has a title, it has a description or label on the vertical axis and on the horizontal axis. It also has units on the vertical axis and units on the horizontal axis. All right, so this is pretty good. Also, it has figure 2. So figure 2 and then a brief description here. So figure X, whatever it is, and then a description is what you should put under each plot. And then if you're talking about it, if you're describing it in the results or the discussion section or something like that, then you can refer to as seen in figure 2, as something, something, something goes up, something else is seen to increase as well. So you can refer to figure 1, figure 2, etc. in your discussion of the results. All right. The results section should be in complete sentences. I think I say this over here. This should be in complete sentences, but it doesn't necessarily have to be in paragraphs. This is just the results. All right. I think I'm going to say this later about the equations. Does it say here about the equations? Yeah, it says right here, right? So the equations that you use, so I want you to type in the equations that you use, but you don't have to include every single little calculation that you do. All right, so write out the equation that you're using, describe how you use that equation, but you don't have to type out every single calculation. For example, in lab 1, we're going to be doing calculations of the densities of the materials. So to do the density, you got to figure out the volume of the material. So you don't have to type out, you can, but you don't have to type out every single calculation that you do to calculate the volume of the material. But type out at least one equation and then explain how you apply that equation in the lab to each different material. All right. So when it actually comes to all the calculations, you can put that in a handwritten calculation page and you can put that at the back of your report. So if it's a handwritten page, you can scan it or take a picture of it with your phone and then include that as the last page of your lab report. Okay. All right, when it comes to the discussion and conclusions questions, there's going to be some discussion questions for each lab. Make sure you answer them completely and in complete sentences, and use a numbered format like this, like number 1, and then in complete sentences, respond to discussion question number 1. Number 2, and here respond to discussion question number 2, etc., and so forth. So use complete sentences here, and it's most of the time, not always, but most of the time, it's going to take at least a couple of sentences to respond thoroughly. Usually, not always, but usually it's going to be more than one sentence in these discussion questions. All right, so give it a little bit of thought. A few more notes down here. You're going to collect data in your lab groups. So the lab group is going to have the same data. So I know that, I realize that. So your plots are going to look similar, but I can tell, I've seen enough of these, I can tell when they've been copied and pasted versus when you've created your own plots. All right, so make sure that you create your own plots and tables and figures and things like that. But you're welcome to discuss it, absolutely. You should discuss it within your group, and you can talk through how you're going to do it and your method for how you're going to do it. But when it comes time to actually do it on your own. Okay, that's what it says here. I've already said this. You need to be present on the day of the lab when we're in person, because that's part of the learning process in this course, is learning how to do these tests. Almost the entire lab report should be typed, but like I said before, if you've got a calculations page, that's fine. Make sure it's neatly written, and then put it at the back of your lab report. And then save it as a PDF. I prefer a PDF. If you need to submit it as a Word document for some reason, that's okay. I won't count off points or anything, but I really would prefer a PDF for consistency. And then upload it to RegNet. In the assignments tab on RegNet, it's already set up in there with all the due dates and everything. So it's all ready to go. All right, so if you have any questions about this, let me know. I'd recommend letting me know before Lab 1 is due. That way we can answer the questions before you actually submit the first lab. All right, and once again, don't forget that the template here in Word format is in RegNet for you. So you don't have to go recreating all of this formatting. I've already done that. So you can just download that Word template, and you can just edit and modify it for each of the lab reports. Okay. All right, I think that is all of the documents that I wanted to share with you today. The only other thing that's on the schedule, but I think we're going to forego for today, is the lab space tour. I just don't think it'd be that productive for me to take my phone and walk around the lab spaces showing you what they are. You'll see it in person soon enough. You'll spend some time in Turner 122 doing labs, as well as in Turner 169 doing a couple of labs. So you'll see that equipment, and it's probably just, it makes more sense for me to describe that equipment at that time. So we'll save that for a later day. So that's going to be about it for today. What are you going to do for next time? Make sure that you can get into RegNet and find the syllabus and read through that and review it. Make sure that you can find the safety procedures, read through those. Make sure that you print out, and that's my strong recommendation, is to print out the schedule for the class. That way you have it for easy reference. Either print out or buy the lab manual from Alamo 2, or print it out yourself. And my strong recommendation is to put it in a 3-ring binder. That way you've got it and you won't lose it, and it's there for easy reference for you. The last thing I asked you to do is please send me an email with a brief introduction of who you are and 2 things about you. You know, could be interesting or mundane, that's fine too. 2 things about you, or 2 things that you did over holiday break or your New Year's resolution, or something to help me start to get to know you a little bit better. All right, that's going to be about it for today. So I hope you have a great first week of class, and I'll see you next time.